CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: a second night of heavy bombardment in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, 2 days after Russia withdrew from a United Nations-backed grain deal. Our other headlines: South Africa has announced that Russia's President Putin will not attend the annual BRICS meeting in person next month. Kenya braces for more violence as protesters begin 3 days of action over tax increases and the cost of living. And UK inflation fell more than expected in June, raising hopes that the Bank of England will ease back on its rate rises. There has been a second night of heavy bombardment in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa. Buildings came under attack just 2 days after Russia pulled out of a United Nations-backed grain deal that allowed shipments to be safely exported across the Black Sea. Our correspondent Louise Greenwood reports.
A fire breaks out at a market in Odessa after a barrage of airstrikes on the city. Ukrainian officials say over half of the drones and missiles launched were shot down in what they call a hellish night. The attack damaged homes as well as infrastructure at the city's port. And it wasn't just Odessa. There were strikes across southern Ukraine, including in the city of Mykolaiv.
I saw a red flash in the window and reacted immediately. The moment I fell on the floor behind the bed, all the windows were blown out. I went downstairs, it was noisy and filled with smoke outside. People were in panic. Some were crying. Glass shards were scattered all around.
Officials say Odessa is being targeted as part of a deliberate campaign to destroy Ukraine's grain exports after Russia withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative earlier this week. But despite claims by Moscow that the routes across the Black Sea will no longer be safe, Ukraine's president has vowed that shipments will continue.
We want our partners, the United Nations and Turkey, not to be afraid of doing everything possible, so that even without the Russian Federation we can use the Black Sea corridor. We're not afraid. Ship companies have approached us and said that they're ready to continue delivering grains if Ukraine lets the ships leave the ports and Turkey lets them go through the Bosphorus Straits.
Meanwhile, in Russian-controlled Crimea, over 2,000 people were evacuated when a fire broke out at a military training base. There's no explanation yet for the blaze, which comes just 2 days after an explosion damaged the Kursk bridge linking Crimea to Russia in a strike that Moscow blames on Kyiv. But despite the ongoing violence, Ukraine's backers say its counter-offensive against Russia is now at a turning point.
This is not over. We continue to generate combat power. Training and equipping 3 brigades in Germany right now, and there's other training ongoing around the region. Our work continues, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that Ukrainians can be successful.
But in Odessa, residents are clearing up after this latest attack in anticipation of more strikes to come. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin will not be attending the annual BRICS summit next month in person. That's according to the summit host, South Africa. Let's talk to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, why? Why will Putin not attend in person?
Well, indeed, we have heard the confirmation from the Kremlin that the Russian president will not go in person to South Africa. Instead, he will join the meeting of the leaders of the BRICS countries via the video link. We understand that the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be representing Russia in person at the gathering. Speaking about the reasons, we haven't had any clear explanation from the Kremlin as to why that is the case. But of course, many remember the ICC arrest warrant that has been issued against the Russian president in Russia Russia. This arrest warrant has been described as null and invalid because Moscow is not under the jurisdiction of the ICC, and also Moscow has been condemning this decision, saying that the Russian president cannot be arrested, and the Russian president has been helping children in Ukraine, evacuating those from the military area. Also, we have heard the Russian Kremlin spokesperson saying that the conversation about the fact that the ICC arrest under the ICC warrant would mean the war, and that was the message to the South African leadership. The Kremlin has said very clearly that there is no need to explain anything to anyone in this world, saying that there was no such discussion, and also stressing that everybody understands what an infringement on the rights of the Russian president would actually mean, referring to the potential consequences. So no explanation provided, but a lot of interesting facts around this event. But again, the Russian experts have also been saying that there are threats of a terrorist attack or an assassination against the Russian president that could be happening while he is out of the Russian Federation.
There's a big business story to talk about. There's been, of course, an exodus of Western businesses from Russia. Moscow has now appointed a new head of the yogurt maker Danone, its Russian subsidiary. What more do we know?
Well, indeed, the Russian president has recently signed an order which imposes the temporary management of the Russian state of the two companies. This is the French dairy maker Danone and the Dutch company, the Dutch brewer Carlsberg. We know that the deputy head of the Chechen government, his name is Yakub Zakhariev. He is the nephew of the leader of Chechen Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, who will now become the CEO of this French subsidiary in Russia. He was taking the position of a Minister of Agriculture of this republic, and now we understand he will be running this company in Russia. This is described as the temporary management that has been introduced by the Russian president, and some people here who have been commenting on this appointment have said that actually Zakhariev has great experience in running such business enterprises. But of course, the Western experts have all been saying that such movements also stress the risks that the foreign companies are facing while remaining and doing business in Russia. But this company was willing to leave the Russian market, and the Russian experts also stress while there is no change for the operations of this company except for the management, it also shows that it is very difficult now for this company to sell its shares to any buyer here in Russia domestically.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. China's vice president says China is willing to cooperate with the United States on climate change. Han made his comments in a meeting with U.S. climate envoy John Kerry in Beijing. Kerry acknowledged diplomatic difficulties between the two countries in recent years and said climate issues should be handled separately from politics. The U.S. climate envoy is ending his visit to China, which aims to reset relations following a suspension in climate talks last year.
We did the wise thing, which is make sure that what we're holding out to folks as a step forward is indeed a step forward. That we're not just putting words on paper, and you'll notice we're not issuing a declaration together because we're not finished finding the pathway with clarity on both sides that will allow us to achieve what we need to achieve. But this is how you get business done. You begin somewhere. You begin those talks. You move the process forward.
China's top diplomat Wang Yi said it's impossible to contain or encircle China during a meeting with the former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in Beijing. Kissinger described himself as a friend of China and said that a stable relationship between China and the United States is essential to world peace. The 100-year-old former U.S. diplomat also met China's defense minister. Kissinger played a key role in normalizing relations between Beijing and Washington in the 1970s. Donald Trump says he expects to be arrested by an inquiry into attempts to undo the results of the 2020 presidential election. The former U.S. president says he received a letter from the Department of Justice informing him that he's a target of their investigation. Such letters often precede an indictment. Trump supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol in a bid to stop Congress from certifying Joe Biden's election win. Kenya has seen another day of protests against tax increases. At least 15 people have already been killed in demonstrations over the rising cost of living, which have now turned violent. Our correspondent Wilkista Naibwa is in the capital, Nairobi. Wilkista, what's the situation where you are today? What's going on?
Well, thank you very much. We are right in the Central Business District, and life is returning to the Central Business District. People are venturing out. However, for the most part of the day, this was not the way it was. Early in the day, we did see that the Central Business District was deserted, but we did see a lot of action in areas that had been deemed hotspots where protesters were expected to assemble. These areas include informal settlements just on the outskirts of Nairobi, where protesters engaged police in running battles. There were 3 points of convergence where protesters were expected to meet, to assemble, and then to march forward to meet later in the day, so there could be one huge stream of protesters. However, we did see that the police did use a different tactic today, that there was heavy deployment of police officers who ensured that a number of these protesters did not assemble and were therefore not able to march to the places where they were expected to come. We also did see that opposition leader Raila Odinga did not arrive as he had come during other protests previously, and we also saw that a number of opposition leaders were also allegedly arrested, and therefore this might have contributed to the fact that later in the day the protests seemed to fizzle out. In Nairobi, we did see that there were protests in other parts of the country as well, but now, later in the day, it appears that there's a sense of normalcy that's coming back to the town. A number of businesses have reopened that had closed, and that a number of people have come back to town. However, do remember that today was only supposed to be the first of 3 days of protest, so we do wait to see what the following 2 days will be like.
Has there been any response from the government and the opposition? I think we may have lost our correspondent there, Wilkista Naibwa in Nairobi, but we might try and turn to that story a little later in the programme. Let's carry on with the rest of today's news now. And Thailand's parliament has refused to allow progressive challenger Peter Limjaroenrat to be given a second ballot for the premiership. The House Speaker's announcement was met with howls inside the chamber and protests outside the building. Our correspondent Chawarat Yongjironon reports now from Bangkok.
Basically, the road to premiership has ended for Kunpita Limjaroenrat, the leader of the Move Forward Party, as the parliament today has finally, after a very long deliberation and debate, voted against him running as a prime minister candidate. Now, it was due to the technicality of the regulations, saying that you cannot propose the same candidate again. We had expected that they would have a short session debating on his candidacy and then a second round of vote, but that didn't happen. The Constitutional Court came out with the announcement that they would be accepting the proposal from the Election Commission to rule on his MP status for his alleged shareholdings of a media company, and therefore his MP status has been suspended. After that announcement, Kunpita abruptly got up out of his chair and moved out of the room, and then came back in again to tell his fellow MPs that despite him not being able to represent the people, he hopes that his fellow MPs will be able to represent the people with the right justice. And it seems as if he didn't show his face again after that incident, as he went to another room to discuss with his coalition partners what's the next step to take. Right now, what we do know is that everything will depend on the next move of the 8-party coalition, and tomorrow we'll probably most likely see what they will be proposing as the next step as the candidacy for the coalition party.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, UK inflation falls more than expected in June, raising hopes that the Bank of England will ease back on those rate rises.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The second night of heavy bombardment in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, 2 days after Russia withdrew from a United Nations-backed grain deal. Our other headlines: South Africa has announced that Russia's President Putin will not attend the annual BRICS summit in person next month. And Kenya braces for more violence as protesters begin 3 days of action over tax increases and the cost of living. UK annual inflation slowed more than expected thanks to a sharp fall in petrol prices. That's raised hopes that the central bank will now take a less aggressive stance at its next policy meeting. The Consumer Prices Index dropped to 7.9% in June. That's the lowest reading since March 2022. The slowdown was helped by moderating food price rises. However, this is still well above the UK government's annual target of 2%. The UK is still the country with the highest inflation among the group of 7 advanced economies. And in order to rein in price rises, the Bank of England has risen rates 13 times in a row to 5%. That sent mortgage rates to their highest level in 15 years. Despite that slowdown, food prices in Britain are still more than 17% higher now than they were a year ago. In our new series, Paying the Price, we look at the impact the cost of living crisis has had on ordinary people in Europe. Our correspondent Kitty Logan visited a street market in England where shoppers are hunting for bargains.
Cash-strapped consumers are seeking to save where they can, and where better to find a deal than at this traditional market.
Cherry extra bright!
We've seen that inflation is currently outstripping wages, so individuals and households are having to deal with a reduction in the affordability of goods and services as their budgets get squeezed.
Analysts say high inflation is partly driven by reliance on food imports and extreme weather hampering domestic harvests.
We've also got a very tight labour market in the UK, which could be contributing to the UK's lingering inflation problem. Worker shortages in the UK, particularly since Brexit, as well as a high number of people who are long-term sick, have added to those wage pressures.
Rising business costs often create higher prices for the consumer, but this food seller doesn't want customers to take the hit, despite more expensive key ingredients.
I was very reticent about increasing my prices. You build regulars when you trade in different markets, and I've seen a lot of businesses in the past sort of throw their prices up too high, and then I think they lose trades.
The strain on household budgets also means less cash for life's luxuries. The cost of borrowing is up too, causing chaos for the mortgage market. But there are signs that at least food inflation is easing.
Some food prices are dropping slightly, like the cost of bread, but the price of eggs, vegetables and fruit are still up about a third on what they were this time last year.
Favourites like tea and coffee now cost 18% more, and fish prices are still going up, meaning many are cutting back. Seeds and grain costs have risen too.
We have tried and keep the prices as low as possible in last year or so, but then some of the product has gone up considerably in last year. Some things like sunflower seeds, for example, which come from Ukraine.
And business is slow amidst consumer caution.
In the past, people used to just buy. Now they just look at the price and see how much is it. They're trying to compare. So yeah, it's affecting a business.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pledged to halve inflation by the end of this year, though he hasn't set an exact figure. And with the economy still not growing, the UK may fall short of that target. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Hertfordshire.
After months of talks, India's Tata Group has confirmed that it plans to build its battery gigafactory in the UK. Tata will invest over $5 billion to build an electric vehicle battery plant in Somerset in England to supply its Jaguar Land Rover vehicles. This marks one of the largest automobile investments in the UK and is expected to create up to 4,000 jobs. The UK plans to ban the sale of new cars using petrol or diesel by the year 2030. Brazil will restart talks with the European Union over a stalled trade deal with the South American trade bloc Mercosur. The Brazilian President, Lula da Silva, said he will be sending the EU a counter-proposal on the terms of the agreement. This deal has been on hold since 2019 due to concerns over Amazon deforestation. Security officials in Afghanistan have reportedly used fire hoses to disperse dozens of women protesting against the closure of beauty salons. The Taliban issued the order last month to shutter the parlours, the latest in a series of laws targeting women. Women are also barred from further education, parks, gyms, fun fairs, and are forced to cover up in public. China has warned the United Nations that artificial intelligence should not become a runaway horse. The Chinese ambassador was among representatives from 15 member countries at the UN's first meeting on AI, which heard how AI poses catastrophic risks for humans, but also an historic opportunity. Our correspondent Nathan King reports.
The speed and reach of this new technology in all its forms are utterly unprecedented.
The United Nations Security Council's mission is to tackle threats to international peace and security. The question is artificial intelligence such a threat, and can collective international action help harness AI's potential? The United Kingdom, using its presidency of the Security Council for the month of July, is highlighting the threats and opportunities posed by AI ahead of a planned UK-hosted summit on the safety of the technology slated to be held this fall.
AI will fundamentally alter every aspect of human life. But we are here today because AI will affect the work of this council. It poses moral questions about accountability for lethal decisions on the battlefield.
Fears over the abuse of AI, from creating deep fake images and information spread on social media that could destabilise political systems, to its potential to replace millions of workers or even wage automated warfare, are haunting the introduction of this technology, which also holds real promise in the fields from medicine to manufacturing and beyond. China has been among the world leaders in developing AI technology and has also been at the forefront of helping establish regulation. The Chinese ambassador to the UN called for international cooperation on the issue, with humans at the helm of the technology, and called for AI systems to be devoid of data bias that handicaps developing nations while avoiding intrusions on individual privacy and national sovereignty.
Certain developed countries, in order to seek technological hegemony, make efforts to build their exclusive small clubs and maliciously obstruct technological development of other countries and artificially create technological barriers. China firmly opposes this behavior. The best path is to maintain open cooperation, encourage interdisciplinary, interindustrial, interregional, and cross-border exchanges and dialogues, and oppose various forms of exclusive clubs and decoupling and disconnection.
At the same time, in the US Congress, the House Armed Services Committee held a hearing on the potential use of AI on the battlefield. Lawmakers and the population at large are alarmed at the ethics of AI-directed warfare, with computers making data-driven decisions without human control. Some military planners, however, see AI-driven decisions as a potential decisive advantage in times of war. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is suggesting the establishment of a body that can help oversee and put in regulations for artificial intelligence, modelled on something like the International Atomic Energy Agency or the Architecture for Climate Change. As yet, there's no consensus on that, but what is clear is that the technology around AI is moving faster than the United Nations ever could, and that's worrying many. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
In Greece, wildfires are continuing to spread, with the fire service sending air and ground units to blazes in 4 different parts of the country. 250 firefighters and 20 aircraft, including 9 helicopters, have now been deployed against a major wildfire in the Diverno-Korea region. These are live pictures of the blaze, the country's worst so far. Aircraft from France and Italy, as well as firefighters from Romania, are being sent to help. The headlines again: a second night of heavy bombardment in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, 2 days after Russia withdrew from a United Nations-backed grain deal. Our other headlines: South Africa has announced that Russia's President Putin will not attend the annual BRICS summit in person next month. And UK inflation fell more than expected in June, raising hopes that the Bank of England would ease back on its rate rises. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next is World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tierney. Well, over to Europe. Unprecedented and dangerous heat wave is baking the majority of southern portions of the continent, and there's no sign of easing in the near future, as we can notice that this huge high-pressure system will continue to take the dominance for the majority of the region over the next few days. And high temperatures here for the majority of Spain, Italy, as well as the Balkans will continue to be in excess of 35 or even topple 40 degrees Celsius as we head into this weekend, and the situation will be quite tough, especially for the sensitive group, including the elderly and children. So please stay indoors as much as possible and drink plenty of water to stay safe. And in terms of the wet weather forecast, we can notice that rather widespread precipitation is likely to unfold here from UK all the way towards into Russia from Thursday into Friday. Most of them will be in the form of some light to moderate intensity of rain, with a patch of heavy rain mainly set the stage here across the northwest of Russia on Friday, so please take caution and be well prepared. And about business and travel for the major cities up in the north, chance of showers for Copenhagen, Stockholm, as well as Helsinki on Friday, with high temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And over to Moscow, we'll see partly sunny skies in the morning hours with a high of 22 and low temperatures about 13 degrees Celsius. And that is all from me. Stay tuned for more City Forecast.